Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show where I talk about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Good Girls. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, I thought it was interesting because we kept getting flashbacks of Rio, and I wasn't quite sure what direction they were going to go in, but I do like how it ultimately ties back into the series, into like the main overarching story, but we'll get to that. So now Rio's put Beth in a very compromised position because once again, it's like, which side are you going to choose? And it seemed like she's most likely going to choose Rio's side, but even she's like, no, I'm not going to do that. You know, it's like, well, you need me alive. He's like, you're right, I do, but I don't need your family alive. And it's like, so you do what I want you to do or you're dead. Basically, the point is to kind of point them in a different direction. And that's something, well, essentially, he wants her to keep stringing them along. And it's like, what if they're not going to believe anything I say? He's like, you'll convince them, you know? So, because I thought maybe everything was completely blown on the Secret Service side of like, oh, I guess it's just a thing of like, it didn't showcase that he knew what was going on. It just showcased, oh, he's just super cautious and he did that just to like be clear. Like they don't know like Beth has been compromised. So I thought that was interesting. I thought that was, but it's like, no, like once again, they underestimate how good Rio is at this. I mean, it seems like he's been at this for a very long time. The game has changed, but probably the thing of like, even though the game has changed and is on a larger scale, it's kind of still found a way to stay the same in certain regards. So, nevertheless, now that this has kind of been brought to the forefront, now you even have Annie and Ruby being like, who do we actually work for? It's like, who do we not actually work for? Because it's confusing at this point in time. So what are we going to do? It's like, I don't know. Like, there's no like easy way out of this. Like, you have to pick a side. And it's like, well, we have nothing left to lose. And then Beth has to remind them, our kids, you know, their families, our lives will be at stake if they screw Rio over. So, you know, they're trying to decide what to do. Dave wants to kind of call it quits, which Phoebe is like, no, let's not, because it's like, yeah, DC's not going to keep paying for like the tab of us doing what we're doing, so we either make a move or we all end up going home. But for Phoebe, it's like, for her and Dave, but it's also more so for Phoebe because she's the one that found out about this first. So this case is very important to her because this case can make her career. But also, like, I think maybe there's just a nature of like, oh, I just want to take down some bad guys. I think it's just for promotional aspects as well. So but I love that Beth's trying to figure things out, and I love that like she's just sitting in the bathtub and she's seeing her kids arguing, and then one like her son like offers one of her daughters like a bent toy, and it's like, and it was like, and even Dean be like, should we be like kind of like mad or should we be like impressed that he just did that, you know? And then that got her thinking like, oh, instead of like, oh, we have a brand, like obviously like Rio's the shiny toy that they want that we work with. So let's give him a broken toy. And I'm like, what is that? And they're like, you're not making any sense. I'm going to be late for work. Should I call my boss to let him know I'm late for work? And then Annie hands her her phone later and she's like, yeah, I should probably just call. Like, yeah, you should probably just call. Like, say you're not coming in today, call for sick day. And I even love how they tease it because they're like, we've got a broken toy. The broken toy is hard cut to commercial break. It's like, you stop teasing me. Because like, who is it? Who is it? And lo and behold, none other than freaking Gene. Which really quickly before all that, I love that Stan tried to, because for him, he was hoping that basically by screwing up Gene's business, that things will kind of screw up and he'll have to kind of let him go. He was trying to like basically rally up the girls. I was like, yo, you don't get no respect. You don't get dental. You don't get daycare money. It's like, yeah, you get money here and there, but if Gene gets a good cut of it, you're the face of this business, you know? And it's like, no, like they don't actually look at her face. And it's just like, you know, he's trying to rally everyone up. And then Ruby's listening to him. He's like, yeah. It's like, how do you strip without taking off your clothes? He's like, exactly. It's like, yeah, but they came there to see the booty. He's like, yeah, that's my point. And she's like, honestly, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. And then he talks about it. He's like, okay, well, what if, like, you know, Gene could just fire all of you and start over? It's like, then we'll handcuff ourselves to the stage and do, like, kind of a old school sit-in. And then it's like, she's like, actually, correction, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. And it stands like, yeah, the girls kind of agree with you on that. They said the same thing. I'm like, because at first I thought Stan was going to be like, what? You don't bat my play? It's like, no, even I recognize it's stupid because the girls called me out for it. So what do we do about this Gene thing? So the ladies show up and they start throwing their money at Gene. I was like, okay, like we want to buy out Stan. But I love immediately he's looking at Annie. He's like, okay, hey, what's I do? She's like 5'2", and he's like, in or out of heels? And if you look at Annie's expression, it seems like there's a part of her that was considering it. Because, I mean, I think for one, it's probably like, oh, you think I'd do good as a stripper? Like, it's a weird compliment, but I think maybe, I don't know if Annie took it as a compliment, because later on she's just kind of like, oh, he's like, can you do the splits and stuff like that? And Beth's like, we're here to do business. He's doing business as well. Because immediately my brain, and she didn't bring it up, but I thought it was like, well, Ben's going to college, you're going to college, so you're probably going to need to start racking up some money. And I mean that's kind of like the stereotypical thing about strippers anyway. Like that's the go-to thing of like, oh yeah, like the stereotype is like most strippers are stripping to either support their kids or like stripping to like strip. It's mainly like strip to like to go to college. The main stereotype is like so they stripping to pay their way into medical college, pay their way through medical college. It's kind of like that, you know. So that's like the main stereotype. But nevertheless, they're trying to buy Stan, and it's like, okay, you want this? We're going to pay you double what Stan's worth. It's like, oh, but he's the greatest. Yep, he's the greatest. So yeah, but can't let go of the greatest. It's like, there you go. I knew it. Yeah, because it's like he's going to keep raising the price, and it's just because Stan's such a good, loyal soldier. Because I think it's like, I'm investing in Stan. Yeah, this money means nothing now. What he can bring me and what he does for me later on brings more money. So it's kind of like I'm investing in the future of our partnership. And it's like, we will give you triple. We got, quadruple if you need it. And so it doesn't matter because they're printing money anyway, so it doesn't matter. So they would go as high as they want to, but he won't give up Stan. So it's like, well, what do they do? Obviously, they're trying to bring up ideas of like, well, did we put it in his trunk? It's like, yeah, but then they're just going to get us. What about we mail it in? It's like, then they get us on mail fraud on top of everything else they're getting us for. But then Annie's like, oh, Arkham Razor, and they're looking at her and she's like, well, you guys haven't heard of it, and she breaks it down, and it's like, sometimes the simplest answer is the right one. And it's just like, okay, she gets her GED and suddenly she's Stephen Hawking, and it's like, what do? They hit the strip club, yeah, making it rain, dude. You probably have to pay up the wazoo for the licensing and stuff like that. I mean, I like the song they picked too. I don't know what the song is. From what it was saying, it was like, oh, it was in French. I was like, oh, that's interesting. But I was like, it would have been a perfect song for that would be like Making a Ring, preferably the remix. I haven't heard that song in so long, but it's like such a damn catchy, it's just a simple and catchy as hook and beat. But regardless, just making it rain, just like, yeah, enjoying themselves, living it up, dancing. You're like, yeah, ladies. I thought what they were going to initially do, it's like, oh, because he doesn't want to do business with women, and that was something Ruby was saying. It was just, it's like, oh, because Beth is like, oh, the dude's a turd, and Annie's looking, and she's like, what? It's like, I don't know, I've just never heard you say refer to anyone as a turd. But it's like, yeah, but he is a turd. He's a piece of, it's like, yeah, but it's like, basically he does that turd doesn't want to do business with women. He just wants to kind of put them down. I thought what they were going to do is, well, I guess if they actually brought Rio into it, it would have been extra suspicious. But I thought they would actually get Rio to show up. And because that's what I've been wanting. I was like, I want these two characters to cross paths. But it's like, nah, they spend money at the strip club. Phoebe and Dave show up, like, what are you doing? It's like, yep, here's the money. Yep, you ready? So they end up locking up Gene. He's like, I'm not going to talk. And they're like, really? Okay, we know it's like, oh yeah, look at this fake money. He's like, no, it's not my club, it's his. It's like, oh, it's his, right? I was like, it's like, whoa. So it's going to be a thing of like, whoa, he has a boss or something. But then he starts breaking down, telling this sob story. Essentially, it's like a pseudo grandfather to him that runs this place. It's like, yeah, we started off doing little small crime stuff here and there. But it's like, then he got sick, the medical bills start stacking up. It's like, but this man's like a grandfather to me. If it wasn't for him, I'd be still be in Philly selling fireworks out of the back of my truck. And he's crying and being so tearful. And just like Phoebe and Dave are just nodding their head. It's just like, they're like, he's like, if you have to charge me. And they're like, we're not charging you yet, right? You're like, with anything that you just confessed. We weren't going for that. You literally gave us everything. I mean, ice cream sundae with chocolate syrup, sprinkles, and a cherry on top. Like, come on, son. It's like, especially how tough, Gene kind of seemed like, man, he cracked under pressure super hard. So it's like, all right, well, what about this dude? And show him a picture of Rio. Who's like, who's the hell is that? So Phoebe comes and confronts Beth, and it's like, oh, hey. It's like, yeah, he confessed to literally everything. It's oh, he's probably lying. And it's like, nope, you're going to have to pick a side, it's like, well, what do you want me to do? I don't have a choice. She's like, you're just going to have to pick a side. It's like, stuck between a rock and a hard place in this situation. So it's kind of a fascinating development. But ultimately, she ends up choosing the cops because he's like, yo, who'd you have more fun with, me or your friends in the van? It's like, who do you think? He's like, yeah. And then, like, the sirens start going off. I was like, whoa, did she? Yeah. Also, made another unilateral decision because she didn't involve Annie or Ruby in that. I don't know if she contacted them later on to let them know what she was doing or what. But, yeah, Rio got arrested. I was like, yo, I know this ain't going to stick, but, man, that's crazy. And he's looking at her like, all right, you know, just like that beginning part is like, oh, yeah, when that one egg is rotten, it kind of ruins all of them. So you put them in the water, whichever ones, was it the ones that don't sink are good and the ones that do sink are bad? I don't remember. Whatever the case may be, I think it's the sink one, the ones that sink are the rotten ones, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe it's kind of like, oh, so here's this rotten, you know, this helped expose the rotten element within their operation, so. And obviously Phoebe and Dave is the back and forth, you know, Phoebe saying like, oh, these are going to, the intervention is like, really? And then Dave grabs his junk, it's like, this is more likely to work on, you never know. And it's like, so they rock, paper, scissors for it. It's like, yeah. And it's like, they go there, it's like, wait, where'd he go? It's like, oh, the DA decided not to, charges, and he was able to walk. And it's like, wait, what? So he goes outside, and lo and behold, who's waiting for him? His cousin/brother. I'm assuming biologically they're cousins, but they grew up like brothers. I think that's what their dynamic is. I think it's that, because that was their grandma, so they like grew up in the same house. But it was an interesting development that I kind of figured, because I was still unsure whether or not Nick knows what Rio's up to, because he comes to visit Beth and drops something off for her, and you know they talk. It's like, oh, you're kind of mixed up with him, and it's like. Kind of don't be mixed up with someone like Rio. And then obviously he's a councilman, and which presents an interesting opportunity, but we'll get to that soon enough. But the fact is that they have, like, he's helping planting all those trees and stuff, and she decided to help. I'm wondering what made her decide to get close to him. Is it because it's like, oh, like, maybe she thought by getting close to the councilman, getting close to Nick, she can understand Rio better? Like, I don't know what her intentions were. Like, it's like, I guess it's like you get some of that Rio without all of the bad. So maybe that's... I don't know what she was really planning with that. Like, I thought that was going to play a role in, like, what she was doing when it comes to Rio, but it doesn't seem like that's the case. Not unless that's something she's stockpiling for later. It doesn't seem like that's the case, but, obviously, like, looking back on their past, obviously, like, Rio was the one that was always kind of doing the shady stuff, and then you had, Nick, well, because Rio was also in the boxing ring, and you're like, oh, I think that's the, like, future he was going towards, but obviously he did a little skimming off the top, stealing people's credit cards type of thing at the club, but it seemed like Nick was the one that did the honest work. It's like, you know, he did what was necessary, whereas Rio kind of found shortcuts and found him tapped into the criminal world, and what set everything in motion for the path he's on now is Nick turned on him and got him arrested. And it's like, yeah, I'm the one that did this, the 6 months, cousin. He's like, brother. And he's like, because of me, look at this. Pulls out cash. This is because of the selling the clubs. This is because of the liquor. And it's like, what's going on? It's like, because they trust me now. Because I turned on you, they trust me. They put me in a position, and they won't see us coming. And that's the point of present day. It's like, you handle the criminal sides of things, but I'm handling things on the councilman side. Like, the higher I climb up this political chain, which is very corrupt anyway, I can grease palms, and I can do this, and none can see us coming. So I was wondering, like I said, I was still on the train of his grandma's the boss, but it's like, nah, Nick is the boss. Like, it's a joint operation. It seems like they're the top dogs. He still potentially answers to his cousin. Not unless we do find out that grandma's behind this, but I don't think so. I think it's just they're both mixed up in all of this. So I guess he wanted to spend time with Beth, you know, just because, well, Rio knows her best. I guess he wanted to try and, like, spend enough time with her to kind of get to know her himself. So that's an interesting setup. You know, other elements I thought were going to play a role in this was, like, for one, we got Breckenmeyer in the episode. Holy crap. Like, Dane is hanging out with them and kind of explaining what happened in jail. And it's just like, oh, yeah, like, he bit some dude's nose off with his teeth. And it's just like, oh, he's playing hard. He's like, no, I'm messing with you. And it's like, yeah, it's like being an elephant in a zoo and everyone's just trying to make you their buddy. And it's just like, yeah. I'm just messing with you. And then they're talking about this skincare thing, and even Dean's like, is that, he even straight up being like, that sounds like a pyramid thing, and they're like, no. And then they're explaining it later on, I'm like, that's, maybe I'm ignorant, that still sounds like a pyramid scheme, like a Ponzi scheme to me. Those are the same thing, aren't they? I think those can be interchangeable. I mean, I think there is a different. Well, because I think a Ponzi scheme wasn't that just because it's literally named after a dude. So the real name is like pyramid scheme. It's like the more like legit name, and I think like Ponzi scheme is because it was named after a dude, wasn't it? I could be mistaken. I like some stuff like that gets named, but it's like I think those can be interchangeable. It might be the thing is that there's a Ponzi scheme and a pyramid scheme. Like I said, I think they're the same, but it could be like maybe there's slight differentiating factors in like how the operation works that kind of separates them. But like I said, I think they're the same thing. Once again, I'm kind of ignorant on the criminal side of things like that, but and then I was like, okay, Dean was like, okay, sure. And I was like, it seems super shady when they were bringing it up and they're talking to him about it later on. But like, oh, he buys into it. But like Beth had given the good news of like, oh, it's over. Like, we got him. It's like, whoa, him? And it's like, yeah. And they sit on the bed and both of them just kind of like, at first, like Beth is just shocked because I think it's like, holy shit. Like after all this time, it's done. It's finally over. And then like, they're sitting on the bed because neither one of them can believe it and they're holding hands. And obviously showcasing the skincare, and it's like, she can kind of tell the, like, oh, you put it on the left. He's like, no, it's the right. And it's like, I'm sorry. And he's like, yeah, I mean, it's an investment and stuff like that. So, we're on the ground floor with this, so we have no idea where it's going. And she's like, yeah, only up. And he's like, whoa, really? She's like, yeah, because you're involved in it. So kind of believing him because like a fresh start in life type of situation. At the same time, Stan's so excited. Oh, do you know what you get for this charge? This charge? Something with an animal? And then Ruby's looking like, he's like, yeah, apparently, no, I'm not shitting you, something with a hedgehog. And it's like, yeah, Gene is going to be out of our lives for the rest of our lives. And it's like, yay, everything worked out. But then she's like, yeah, he's like, and Stan's kind of moving because she's like, how do you feel, boo? And he's like moving and dancing. He's like the luckiest man. And she's like, what, man, like the luckiest person alive. It's like, oh, that hedgehog. He's like, yeah, but that hedgehog ain't alive. So he's feeling good. But Ruby had that like solemn expression, like, once again, maybe she didn't know the whole Rio thing had been dealt with. Like, once again, that's the big problem. We never know what Beth is telling Annie and Ruby. And I'm surprised she even, well, there's certain things she feels the need to tell them, but it's like, some stuff is like, well, this has got to go down now. So I kind of, once again, had to make a unilateral decision. So we'll see how they feel about it, especially when Rio rolls up and is like, yo, now I ain't going to hurt nobody, because he's like, now that you've done this, they're going to believe everything we say. We're going to run them. So it's kind of like, okay, so once again, this, every time Rio gets pissed at you, something comes up where it's like, he gives her a chance time and time again, but now it's a situation where it's like, nah, this actually works to their benefit. Like, killing her be easier, but it's actually interesting because it seemed like Nick's the one that kind of talked him out of it, and he kind of agrees with Nick's plan of just like, biding our time, making them see what they want them to see, and we continue doing what we're doing. So just when you think you're out, they pull you back in. Is she going to tell Dean? It's like, maybe not, because Dean's so excited about this that, like, she doesn't want to dash his hope, just like the hot tub business. Like, well, I don't want to dash his hope by telling him the truth about, like, right, Rio is involved in all this. Once again, I think this is going to heat up more and more, the whole, like, Ruby issue. Like, Annie is ultimately going to have to pick a side. I think, like, things got a little heated last episode. I think they're going to get even more heated going for it because of all of this. So it's like, so what do we do now? It's like, well, because he has enough, like, powerful connections that it's like, we can't make a move against him. I wonder if Beth going to be like, it has to be his brother/cousin. Why? It's like, well, do they know about the brother/cousin? Because it's like, yeah, I got to meet him. It's like, whoa, you're making more moves, you're getting deeper in bed with this family. It's like, he's a councilman. He's the one that probably potentially pulls strings and stuff like that. So it's not just Rio they're dealing with. They're his cousin. Like I said, I think it's his cousin, but they grew up like brothers. I think that's where that situation is. But, we'll ultimately have to wait and see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. It's going to be interesting to ultimately see how that all ends up playing out. The skincare thing, because I think that I can tell that's going to go sideways. Now this, what, the Secret Service's relationship and like what they're going to want from Beth and what kind of information Rio and Nick are going to have her feed them. Once again, the Beth and Annie and Ruby dynamic, like, is that going to shift? Is there going to be some bad blood on that aspect to it? We'll ultimately have to wait and see. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.